Tonight on Politicat,
a recap of one of the most memorable inaugurations in history,
and what the COVID-19 vaccine rollout looks like for America.
All that and more tonight on Politicat. It's your politics right now. Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Chloe Cope.
And I'm Julia Richardson.
January 6th is a day that will go down in history. Hundreds of Trump supporters storming the Capitol in protest of election results. According to NPR, the Department of Justice has charged 150 people since then and identified hundreds more they believed were involved. Trump was impeached for the second time, and his trial is scheduled to resume on February 9th, although many senators have called it unconstitutional, and Democrats know an acquittal is likely.
Almost a week since inauguration, President Joe Biden has kept busy passing executive orders. On his first day in office alone, passing over a dozen, from ending Trump administration-era policies such as the ban on travelers from mostly Muslim countries, to mandating mask wearing on federal property to stop the spread of COVID-19. But Biden is just getting started, and in the remainder of his first 100 days, there will most likely be many more to come.
Now, former President Donald Trump had an eventful last few weeks in office. After the January 6th insurrection, he became the first president to be impeached twice. In Trump's final hours as president, he issued a series of pardons that included many of his allies, but not himself or his family. Trump also carried out 5 executions leading up to Biden's inauguration, the first one since 2003. Biden promises not to oversee any executions during his term.
While no one expected a presidential inauguration during a pandemic to be normal, last week's kickoff to President Biden's term looked a lot different from most inaugurations. NNN's Talia Kaelman breaks down President Biden's inauguration with NU political science professor Laurel Harburg-Young.
The inauguration of the 46th President of the United States looked different from most previous inaugurations, but there were 3 key differences that especially stuck out.
People were more separated. You didn't have a large crowd there. You had the flags out instead. Everyone wearing masks, which I think was politically a symbolic move in contrast to the Trump administration, where people rarely wore masks. You saw that as a result of the insurrection in the Capitol and the kind of pro-Trump mob storming the Capitol on January 6th, the amount of security in DC was substantially higher. I think, many presidents do offer a kind of hopeful, optimistic tone, a tone of trying to bring the country together in their speech. But in contrast, I think in terms of Trump's speech in 2017, after when he was inaugurated, his American Carnage speech, this was at direct odds with that. And of course, you had the fact that Trump did not attend, and that is a very rare behavior within our democracy. And so I think it was valuable that Mike Pence did attend to at least have some symbolic transfer of power between the outgoing administration and the incoming administration.
Professor Harburg-Young says some of her favorite moments from the inauguration include the friendly and genuine interactions between former presidents, poet Amanda Gorman's performance, and specifically,
it was obviously the inauguration of the first female vice president and the first vice president of color. I think I knew it was momentous going into it, but I got a little bit more emotional than I thought I would have. This is a big first in our country.
With President Biden getting to work on his agenda and the impeachment trial of President Trump set to begin soon, Professor Harburg-Young says some consequences of the last few weeks have yet to be seen. Talia Kaelman, Northwestern News Network.
From Amanda Gorman's poetry to Bernie's mittens, there were plenty of highlights to take away from the inauguration of President Biden, an inauguration Americans won't soon forget.
Biden's cabinet is one of many firsts and is shaping up to be one of the most diverse in U.S. history. Here's more from NNN's Katrina Pham.
Biden's presidency marks a turning point in U.S. history, taking steps toward a more diverse government.
So the diversity represented in Biden's cabinet is truly historic.
Secretary of Defense General Lloyd Austin, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, and Secretary of Health and Human Services Xavier Becerra are just a few of the nominees for cabinet who will be the first of their ethnicity in their position. But is this a moment to be proud of?
A lot of people are only coming to learn for the first time, something that I've often shared with students in my classroom that's kind of mind-blowing, but a lot of people don't realize that we've had an Indigenous vice president before.
There are also questions whether the cabinet will align with Biden's historically centrist views. Nominee Deb Haaland, for example, is not as progressive as some hope.
I don't think Deb Haaland's appointment is just for show and is an empty gesture. And at the same time, she is not a radical. This is why these people get picked for the positions that they do, right? I mean, because they're non-threatening, to certain forms of political order.
However, Biden's cabinet may have some surprises in store.
I think that people are going to be surprised by how progressive this centrist president actually turns out to be. And all you have to do is look at what's happened in the first few days.
The work of bringing people of color onto cabinet has been long awaited and is representative of the growing sentiment for racial equity in America.
Oh, I think this door, now that it's opened, is never closing again. And it's built on the fact that we now have risen up a generation of wonderful women, wonderful people of color in every field and every discipline.
This progress should not just be attributed to President Biden. The president's historic cabinet is the work of many groups coming together and pushing for change.
Joe Biden didn't do this. Indian country did this.
Katrina Pham, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Katrina. We'll have to see what actions Biden and his new cabinet take in the coming months. But for now, the many firsts that Biden is bringing to the cabinet is its own victory.
While Democrats in the Senate are keen on passing COVID relief and other parts of Biden's platform, it appears the pesky filibuster will remain a part of the legislative process. Senator Joe Manchin, a key vote on the issue, is currently opposed to ending the filibuster.
Basic arithmetic now ensures that there are not enough votes to break the rule. Any chance of changing his mind? Quote, none whatsoever.
Once called, the filibuster allows endless debate until 60 members vote for discussion to cease. In a speech on the Senate floor Monday, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell made his case for continuing the filibuster.
The bar for lawmaking is high. It should be high, even if both bodies take turns being slightly frustrated by it.
Critics of the filibuster took to social media, many echoing former President Barack Obama and calling it a Jim Crow relic in reference to its use in holding back civil rights legislation.
And there seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel as Americans begin to receive COVID vaccines. NNN's Hannah Zhang has more.
Over the past 30 days, the U.S. reported nearly 6.5 million new COVID cases, and the nationwide vaccine rollout has missed some key targets. The Trump administration expected to vaccinate 20 million Americans by January 1st, but it took until January 24th, 3 weeks later, to meet that goal. The CDC reports that over 14 million doses have been distributed across the country, but so far only half of them have made it into people's arms. People waiting for months, health officials unsure whether to reserve second doses. How far are we from a post-COVID life? I spoke to Maureen Bolin, Associate Professor of Infectious Diseases at Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine, to shed some light on the vaccine rollout.
The federal government basically left it up to the states to decide the procedure under Trump's administration. So how has that process been, and what is the reason behind the slow rollout?
There has been a lot of uncertainty about exactly how many doses there are, how many doses the states would be receiving, and that has been a problem for planning because you certainly don't want to promise more doses than you actually are going to get in terms of just the personnel, whatever communication form you're using with the patient. So is it an electronic, is it an app? All of those things take money to do. And so I think that one of the issues was that the federal government was providing vaccine and nothing else. I do believe that the COVID relief that was passed a few weeks ago did have some money for the vaccination, so that will be helpful, but there's probably going to be more need as the rollout continues.
So what would be needed as more of a plan from federal government for the vaccination to speed up?
I think that people really need to know what the numbers of vaccine are, right? They need to have assurance that if they give their first vaccine to a person, that there's going to be a second dose coming, and they need to know how the supplies match with the populations in each tier. So you can't, move on to phase 1C if you don't know that you have enough to vaccinate your 1B people.
Yes, I also heard about news about leftover vaccines that are being wasted. What's the situation about that?
Yeah, so it starts, I think, with the requirements for the vaccines to be kept at very low temperature. They kind of plan to give a number of doses in a day. They thaw out the vaccine they think that they're going to need, and then maybe not everyone who had an appointment comes. And so they actually can't keep the vaccine until the next day because it will have expired.
How far are we really from getting back to normal life?
Unless either another vaccine is produced, one of the adenovirus produced and approved, or that the messenger RNA producers can make more than what they've already committed to, then I think you're looking probably at the entirety of 2021 before we could get to that herd immunity level.
Can people stop wearing masks and social distancing once they're vaccinated?
What we know that the vaccines prevent infection, they prevent people from getting sick, but we aren't sure at this point whether they're going to prevent transmission. So having had the vaccine, I could still encounter someone with COVID. I could still get the virus.
Hannah Jiang, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Hannah.
And now, Zach Kessel brings us a look into the evolving Republican Party.
Thanks, Julia. The Senate is set to begin hearing impeachment arguments on February 9th, and despite public sentiment, many in the Republican Party refuse to break with the former president. Florida Senator Marco Rubio recently told Fox News that he thinks the impeachment trial is, quote, stupid, adding, quote, we already have a flaming fire in this country. After the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham declared his close relationship with Trump dead.
Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. I hate it being this way. Oh my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see. All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough.
But shortly afterward, he rode on Air Force One with the outgoing president and released a statement saying supporting the impeachment process would, quote, do great damage to the institutions of government and could invite further violence. The fight over the party's future is not only taking place inside the Beltway. On Saturday, the Arizona GOP re-elected Chairwoman Kelly Ward, nicknamed Chemtrail Kelly for her propensity for conspiracy theories. In December, Ward joined a lawsuit against former Vice President Mike Pence in an attempt to compel him to overturn the results of November's presidential election. Later in that meeting, the state party passed 3 censure resolutions against current Republican Governor Doug Ducey, former Republican U.S. Senator Jeff Flake, and Cindy McCain for insufficient loyalty to Donald Trump. Trump, on his part, is reportedly considering forming a Patriot Party, turning up the heat on Senate Republicans who may otherwise want to vote to convict. Though the GOP might split, it likely won't be those on Trump's team who have to leave. Colorado's Lauren Boebert and Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene, dubbed the QAnon Congresswomen, were sworn in this month and were greeted by the Republican caucus with open arms, while Trump allies in Congress organized to oust House Conference leader Liz Cheney. Political parties are hard to build. If they have the voter support, why would Boebert or Greene, not to mention Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, leave the GOP? Though the future of the Republican Party has yet to be determined, it seems unlikely that Mitt Romney and Matt Gaetz can occupy the same party for long. I'll be here on Politicat over the course of the quarter, covering the brewing Republican Civil War. Zach Kessel, Northwestern News Network.
Thanks, Zach.
Since Russian interference in the 2016 election, it's become increasingly clear that US-Russia relations would remain in the spotlight, and President Joe Biden's approach to the relationship is worth watching. Megan Leibowitz explains.
On Tuesday, President Biden spoke with Russia's President Vladimir Putin for the first time since Biden's inauguration. The call comes as Russia is being rocked by protests following the arrest of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who was poisoned last year. Now, according to the press release, Navalny's poisoning was one of the issues that the two discussed, but Biden also brought up issues of national security. Remember the reports of Russia placing bounties on US soldiers in Afghanistan? That news broke last year, and it's likely to play a big role in the US-Russia relationship moving forward. More recently, the US discovered a massive cybersecurity breach of government agencies, and intelligence points to Russia. Now, the call was not entirely adversarial. According to the press release, both leaders are interested in extending New START, an arms reduction treaty. But going forward, Americans will likely judge Biden on his ability to handle election and cybersecurity issues perpetrated by the Kremlin. Back to you.
Thanks, Megan.
For tonight's final word, we discuss the impact of Twitter's suspension of President Trump's account on discussions of free speech and the internet's influence on politics.
Following the Capitol riots on January 6th, Twitter banned President Trump's account as well as his campaign's account, sparking debates over the violations of free speech and the role of social media companies in regulating online content. Twitter cited specific violations of their community guidelines, saying they suspended Trump's account due to, quote, the risk of further incitement of violence, referencing the riots. The company released a statement identifying 2 specific tweets from Trump's account, which said he would not attend the inauguration and that his supporters would not be silenced, as violations of their glorification of violence policy. Though Trump protested what he viewed as an infringement of his First Amendment rights, Twitter has maintained the suspension and removed other prominent accounts as well, including MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey addressed the decision to remove Trump from his platform, characterizing it as policy enforcement, not as a political demonstration or precedent. This is not the first time Twitter and President Trump have clashed, with Twitter adding fact-checking disclaimers to Trump's tweets earlier in his term. However, despite Dorsey's insistence that the suspension is non-political, the company's actions have certainly impacted the dynamic between politicians and their internet freedom. Whatever precedent they have set has yet to be defined, but they have certainly made waves on the internet. That's all the time we have for Politicat tonight. I'm Chloe Cope.
And I'm Julia Richardson.